And we're live.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to November 9th Standing Committee of Council. And I'd like to call the meeting to order, it being 6:30. You have before you a copy of tonight's agenda. I'm looking for a motion to adopt the agenda. Councillor Willow, seconded by Councillor Dufert. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Item number 3, is there any declarations of interest? None being noted. Moving on to item number 4, announcements, award ceremonies, and presentations. Do we have anything from council? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I think there's a parade or something going on this evening in front of Roy Helmers and his girlfriend Shelley, I think her wife, I'm not sure. During our meeting here, so it's just like kindness group is thinking that was a good idea, and I think it's a great idea for the helping that lady that got attacked by the bear.
Perfect. Yes, it is a really good idea. He is totally our hero. Any other announcements from council? Nothing noted. Administration?
Nothing from administration, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson. Somebody needs to let him into the meeting, please. Okay, so item number 5 is a delegation, and tonight we have with us Sergeant Curtis Philippow of the RCMP detachment here in Hay River. Welcome to Hay River and welcome to our meeting. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to you. You're on mute, Curtis.
So I am. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And for those that I haven't met, I imagine things keep on changing on my screen, so I hope you can still hear me. Anyway, I hope over the next short while I'll have an opportunity to meet you all. And I may unknowingly, so please, if I do meet you, please let me know who you are and what your role is in the community. It's great to put a face to a name and kind of understand where people are coming from and what the role is in the community. Now, I won't review the report you see on screen, the monthly policeman report, unless there's any specific points that the council wants me to go over or to provide further explanation. And as far as the numbers are concerned on the 2 tables here, if we want to scroll through there. Now, again, if there's anything specific you want me to address, I can certainly do that, whether it's now live or in camera or perhaps private conversation at some other point. But when I look at the numbers now, this is month number 3 for me here. So I'm just diving into Hay River and the unique characteristics that we have here in town and some of the positives and challenges. When I look at the numbers, nothing really stands out in my mind. Now, some of the numbers might be higher than we would like. Obviously, we don't want any assaults. We don't want any sexual offenses. That's clear. But there's nothing really that jumps out as far as anything being very, very high or very, very low as well. So, for example, when I mean low, if we had 0 impaired driving cases, then that might mean that we're not doing our job from a proactive perspective, or the public isn't comfortable or confident in reporting suspected impaired drivers. So nothing stands out. I did draw your attention to impaired driving specifically because it's lower than it was last year at this time, almost double or 50% less. I have no explanation for that. But it could just be COVID related. Maybe we have less traffic, for example, or less social events where people are out consuming alcohol and driving. So a few things I'd like to discuss that actually. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we sure can.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. I'm just getting some text boxes flashing on my screen here, so I want to make sure that I didn't lose you or exit the meeting. So a few things I wanted to discuss that aren't actually in this report. One would be efforts that we're making to decrease not just property crime, but some of the problems that we see in the community related to property crime, which is pretty low, but it's still there, and substance abuse specifically, and some of the driving infractions that we see, and violence, of course, and that would be through habitual offender management. Now, there wasn't a formal process in place in Hay River. So, and we know that it's a very small number of people cause the most harm in a community, generally speaking. And, so for example, we might have 5% of the population cause 95% of the harm to community. So what we're hoping to achieve with habitual offender management is look at those that are the frequent flyers, if you will, and specifically those that are on conditions, court-imposed conditions, or even police-imposed conditions, and monitoring them, and in doing so, assisting them to be compliant and basically not break the law. So whether it be reoffending or recommitting similar offenses or failing to comply with their conditions. So that's one thing that we'll hopefully see a net gain. That will take some time to see results of that program. But what we are doing right now is just identifying around 5 candidates at a time and just monitoring them closely. Of course, we're monitoring other people as well, but specifically there's 5 that we have in mind that we're monitoring. I should ask, how much time do I have?
Usually it's 10 to 15 minutes. So, but you're new.
Okay. I'll speed along here. So I would like to talk about COVID, and I would like to mention that we as a detachment here in Hay River, we're doing a lot of things that are in line with what other RCMP detachments are doing, and we're following guidelines that have been established by the RCMP. In Hay River, we have some latitude as to what we want to do to protect ourselves and protect the public. So we're still being very cautious, and we're open for business per se. However, our door is locked. So, but we're still dealing with anything priority that comes in, and we're just not allowing people free access to our lobby. And what we're doing is much in line with what a lot of businesses and institutions are doing here in Hay River. So as you see businesses maybe loosening and other institutions loosening some of their rules and restrictions regarding access, you'll see us doing the same, us as in the RCMP in Hay River. So just so you're aware of that, we just want to, I appreciate that the community of Hay River and Northwest Territories are being very guarded and very careful, and so we're certainly wanting to do that as well. Last thing I'd like to talk about are drugs in the community, and Mayor, you and I spoke about this, and we as a RCMP detachment are certainly aware of that, and we know that there's drugs. And a lot of times what I find is that people, general public, don't think that we're aware or we're doing anything about drugs in the community or substance abuse specifically, because they don't see us, storming in and kicking in doors and doing those things that people expect us to do and expect the police to do. But just be assured that there are things happening behind the scenes, and we're making some forward momentum, and we're looking at a multifaceted approach, and just not doing things that are flashy and will maybe catch media attention, for example, or will be the talk of town. We want to be very methodical with our approaches and do a good job, and something that's perhaps sustainable. And that also comes back to habitual offender management that I spoke about earlier too, where we want to tie things together and not just deal with one issue at a time when they are best addressed in concert with other issues as well. So I feel like I could speak more about a variety of things, but I can leave it at there. So in respect of the timelines, and that gives you time for any questions.
Thank you. Looks like we have our first one. Councillor Willows, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and welcome to the community, Curtis. I'm just trying to get a sense both of COVID. I'm on a few other boards, and we hear anecdotal evidence, I guess, from time to time suggesting that COVID has seen a marked increase in domestic violence, in drugs coming into the community. However, when I look at the statistics that you've put forward, I don't get the sense that things have gotten worse. In fact, in some instances, it looks like maybe occurrences are a little bit down. I'm just wondering if maybe you could just give us a quick overview, seeing as you're new in town, of first impressions, specifically how it relates to the COVID and whether occurrences are more frequent or less frequent, or how to digest that information.
It's been very interesting because some communities have seen an increase in call volume, not necessarily specifically violence, domestic violence, child abuse, that sort of thing, but just an increase in call volume. And you could attribute that perhaps to maybe increased money in the hands of those that perhaps have never received payments such as CERB, for example. So here in Hay River, I'm actually surprised, and considering that we're one of the isolation centers, we really haven't seen a sharp increase in calls for service, not specifically crime, but calls for service that one might have expected. And I'm new, yes, I do look at numbers. So I compare what's been happening in the last couple of months to what's been happening prior to COVID. And it seems like a lot of the there's minor fluctuations, but nothing alarming. A lot of the numbers are relatively plateaued. And in talking to my colleagues and others in kind of in the justice realm, there hasn't really been a marked increase in any particular type of call in Hay River or KFN or Enterprise for that matter. So I don't have a specific answer other than I'm probably making similar observations to those in the community that there hasn't been any increases of concern or decreases for that matter. So for example, one of the concerns was that with kids not going to school, then there weren't school staff, for example, that were reporting instances of child abuse, for example. And not that I've seen a lot of cases of child abuse or neglect for that matter here in Hay River, but it's not like we've seen a complete dip where those aren't getting reported anymore because there isn't the interventions from schools and the like.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. I did have a question. I did notice that a lot of the numbers are down, and in most instances, that is a good thing. Drug trafficking, right? I noticed that there was, we've had 30, that's up and as reflected in the community. I'm sure we've all noticed. But on the justice reports, it says drug seizures are 0 as compared to 15 from the previous year. So I guess that's a concern when I see something like that, we do have trafficking, but we're not seizing anything. I'm not sure how to interpret the numbers maybe.
Okay, so the challenge with just looking at the numbers itself is that numbers don't tell the whole story, unfortunately, and that's just the reality of it. So you might have drug trafficking. We might have reported instances of drug trafficking, but they're not actual full police investigations. For example, someone might call and say so-and-so is selling some sort of illicit drug, and there's really no substance to it. It's a simple report. It might be taken as information only because it's perhaps an anonymous reporter or there's not enough information to actually proceed. So we might be getting the reports, but we're not actually getting a case that will lead to seizing drugs or even drug paraphernalia for that matter. Now, as far as total previous last year, there's been 15 drug seizures. So I'm going to presume that that's 15 separate instances where we seize drugs. And I don't know why we're not getting them this year. It might be, just me. My presumption is that we're perhaps doing less traffic stops because of COVID, where sometimes we would find drugs in vehicles because people are simply driving and they have fresh smoked marijuana that we can smell, which will lead us to doing that investigation, perhaps seizing some bit of marijuana or even paraphernalia for that matter. So I would, if you wanted an explanation, you'd have to give me some time to do some research and get back to you.
Fair enough. Any other questions from council? Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Yeah, just welcome. My question would be about, and I think I asked Brandon a couple times, just along the lines of what bylaws you would see maybe after you've been here for a little bit longer. But I know one area of concern that the community doesn't have an ATV bylaw, both the territorial bylaws for ATVs and stuff. And I want to say during COVID, it seemed like it was kind of rampant that there was lots of ATVs on the roads and underage and not even helmets type thing. So I guess that's just an area of concern that I know has been discussed before. So I'll leave that just as a comment for now, I guess. I'm not sure if you've got any update on that.
Okay, I didn't catch everything that you said. There's a little bit of radio silence there, but yes. So the absence of an ATV bylaw really doesn't have much impact on our ability to educate and enforce when it comes to ATV usage or off-highway vehicle usage. Now, there's territorial legislation that we could always lean on, and we don't specifically need an ATV bylaw. There's some challenges that we have with enforcing this. Now, I know I've offered some guidance to those I work with in that we will address off-highway vehicle complaints and when it's appropriate to lay charges and to actually make an effort to address it. It's been made clear that it's an issue, and I noticed it right away when I arrived. I arrived August 1st and saw a lot of off-highway vehicle usage in the area. And of course, it's new to me coming from Alberta. It's not, although I did live and police in the Yukon where you could drive an off-highway vehicle typically on a roadway as long as it was insured and registered. But so I'm getting used to that once again now that I'm in the Northwest Territories. However, it's certainly something that we're addressing, and it's when it needs to be addressed, we're addressing it, and we're not certainly targeting those people that are respectful and responsible and appear to be following the rules and regulations. For example, if a ATV has a license plate on it, then probably it's following the law and it has an appropriate driver and it has insurance. Now we're working with your protective services specialist on this as well, and we've been in talks with him as well as to how we're going to address this. One thing we talked about was doing an education component first, and part of that educational component was actually just to make people aware of what the rules were, and then also have that serve as a forewarning that we would then be enforcing.
Perfect. Any further questions from council? Go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
Well, thank you, Worship. Curtis, I just want to thank you and your family for coming to Hay River and choosing Hay River as a posting. I just want to welcome you to Hay River, and you're an excellent neighbour. And I think just from what I see is you're spending a lot of time at work. So, but I just want to thank you for your efforts in helping our community and move forward with the issues that we have in our community. And I just want to thank also the people that work in the detachment. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything further from council? Okay, nothing noted. I will reiterate Councillor Anderson's comments, and I do look forward to working with you in the future, and welcome to Hay River, Curtis. Don't
Thank
feel
you.
like you have to stick around. You can leave the meeting if you wish. So
Okay.
we'll move on to the next one. Again, thank you.
Sure. Well, I'll take a peek at the agenda, but it's also bedtime in my house, so I will do that. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Okay, so moving on to item number 6, Councillor Liaison reports. Who would like to go first? Oh, Councillor Duford, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a short report. I had met with Mr. Makepeace and nothing too much to report other than the Senior Society would like the council to keep at the forefront the need in their perspective for the zoning laws to maybe change a little as we move forward with our capital plans. The need for maybe to allow smaller houses to be built and smaller lots that could help seniors and first-time homeowners. And the other thing, of course, was, which we are all aware of, the absence of any television. And he has let me know that there are quite a few seniors in town right now that do not have any television because they can't afford or don't have access to satellite. So, and we are aware of that problem, but that's just all I have to say for now. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Duford. And who's next? Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing major to report. We're conducting our monthly meetings with the Housing Authority, and it's going very well. And I just want to thank the Housing Authority staff for what they do for our community. We had a Chamber of Commerce meeting, the first one last couple of weeks ago, and that was an in-person meeting. So we spoke about what we can do for businesses and so forth, and we're reaching out to businesses over the next couple of weeks just to see what we can do as a chamber and so forth. So other than that, it's things are going well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Willows, go ahead. You're on mute, Brian. Sorry.
Thank you. Very short report from health. The vaccination clinic has been a great success. Still looking for some statistics that they're putting together to find out exactly how many vaccinations we gave out this year as compared to other years. And when I have that information, I will share that with you. And just a reminder to the public, for those still interested in getting a flu vaccine, it's still available through Public Health if you phone and make an appointment. And the other good news is it looks like we will be fully staffed with doctors through the Christmas holidays, which is a rare treat. So that's wonderful news. That being said, there will be some staff, of course, taking Christmas holidays because they couldn't take holidays earlier on in the pandemic, but we're making some allowances for some folks to have holidays. And that's everything from me.
Thank you. Anything further from council? Okay, nothing noted. I have been meeting regularly with NWT Association of Communities. Last Friday, we had another update from our COVID guys, and they have notes here somewhere. Hang on. So they announced, Minister Chena announced the 2.594 funding gap was accepted. The recommendations that the NWT Association put forward was accepted, so it will there will be extra money for those of us who are short. They're also offering briefings to administration in regards to the funding. Russ Newdorf, who is in charge of the task force, let us know that they are looking at changing some of the rules around COVID, limiting payment on self-isolation, considering compassionate medical reasons for self-isolation at home, mental health issues, and some Christmas messaging, because I know people are anxious to know what's going to happen over Christmas, and that was one of the questions I had. So that's supposed to be coming out sooner rather than later. There is some changes coming probably for funeral protocols, because it was an outdoor 50 people or less scenario. That not being possible in the winter, the Office of the Chief Public Health Officer is working on protocols to allow 25 or less, but there is still an exemption required right now, and hopefully some changes coming. Anyone in self-isolation is not allowed. Let's be clear on that. If you're in self-isolation, you cannot attend funerals, weddings, anything. You're in isolation. The Secretariat, there was funding approved for that this week by Cabinet. The Compliance Enforcement Officer spoke about highway border check stops being ready for winter. The Dempster Highway is closed, so they're getting ready for the winter road season now. Fort Smith is still in place. The roadblock, or the I guess it's a roadblock at the border there. However, there are talks going on. Parks Canada is proposing no winter road. So that is coming down. They're still talking about that. They are now up to full staff. The regional lead in Fort Smith. There's a regional lead in Hay River. So everybody in the different regions have been assigned leads for the task force. So that'll make it a little more better communication, I think, going forward. And so that was basically everything from my meeting. Any questions? Regards to that. So basically there will be some changes coming out of the Chief Public Health Office shortly, I would imagine, and guidelines around Christmas as well. Okay, so if we have no more reports from council, we'll move on to item number 7, administrative inquiries, and I will pass it over to SAO Smith.
Thank you, Your Worship. We will start with the Director of Protective Services, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Other than my report that's in the council package, I really have not too much to add to that, unless there's some questions.
Any questions for our Director of Protective Services? That was a quick one, Ross.
Sorry.
Okay, back to SAO Smith.
Okay, we'll go next. We'll try the Director of Finance.
Good evening. Thank you, Your Worship. A few updates from Finance Administration. I'll be presenting the draft capital plan for 2021 this evening and presenting that information to the public for their consideration on Thursday this week. We'll be bringing the O&M budget forward after that, when we've had a chance to consider whether or not there are any increases required to capital reserves as a result of the capital budget discussion. Also, we'll be bringing forward the 2020 Q3 O&M and capital to the Finance Committee and Council in the not too distant future. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for our Director of Finance? Deputy Mayor Bouchard, go ahead.
Yeah, he just mentioned, is there a meeting? What's the Thursday? What's happening on Thursday? Sorry.
Thursday, we're looking at having public consultation on the capital budget Thursday evening at 6:30 at the community hall. Is that correct, SAO Smith?
Yeah, that's correct. We'll speak a little bit more to that in the update on our capital budget, but there is that. There's also a Finance Committee meeting to follow that immediately.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Nothing noted. Back to you, SAO Smith.
Thank you, Worship. The Director of Recreation, please.
You're on mute, Stefan.
Sorry, I thought I unmuted there. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Other than my monthly report that I submitted, I do have a few updates here. Main one being that the Aquatic Center reopened today. We've been receiving a lot of booking requests, given that swim times are on appointment only at this time. Things seem to have been going pretty well. Obviously, some details to figure out as we take the bookings and as patrons return to the pool. But I have to say it was very nice to see the blinds open for the first time in over 6 months, and water in the pool, people making use of the facilities, and we've got some of our regular swimmers that were very happy to be back in the water. We also had first aid training via our aquatic staff and in partnership with the National Life Saving Society over the weekend. 9 participants, all passed. Several of them were either current staff renewing first aid certifications or participants that either did the Bronze Cross courses last weekend and are looking for employment as junior guards, or people looking to do next weekend's lifeguard certification, and they needed the first aid in order to do lifeguard certification. So it does also help with recruitment for our aquatic staff. The curling club also returned to play last week. Haven't received specific feedback, but sometimes no news is good news. I'm assuming things went fairly smoothly, and I'll reach out to their executive and to their volunteers and make sure that things went well. I was in touch with the Chief Environmental Health Officer and who's been coordinating with the Chief Public Health Officer regarding reviews of some occupancy guidelines and some more general guidelines also for 2 areas in the community center. It sounds like they will be increasing the occupancy for our pool. They asked for dimensions and some other information. I'm assuming there is a request from another community, and they're reviewing everything in all communities for consistency. And I was supposed to have a meeting with them on Friday afternoon, and they canceled that meeting, indicating that they were having their own discussions to review occupancies and guidelines for arenas. The latest messaging sounded like there could possibly be a review to maximum occupancies and restrictions on bleacher use and dressing rooms. We should hear more this week. Quick reminder for council that on stat holidays such as Remembrance Day this Wednesday, the community center operates on reduced hours, so we'll be open 12 to 6. Those hours are the same for most stat holidays, and we have determined that over the Christmas holidays we'll be operating on similar hours between December 24th and January 3rd. Public communication should go fairly soon regarding those reduced operational hours. Lastly, I have a rec committee meeting tomorrow. I'll be updating the rec committee on, or giving them a summary of our O&M variance reports and giving them some indication on the 2021 budget planning and seeking some of their input on that process. On the tourism and economic development side, a few things in the works. One, our coordinator is preparing a report for council regarding support of the Seniors Society Food Cycler project or pilot project. That report should be ready fairly soon and presented to council. We are also working with other members of the management team on an ISIP cultural spaces application for funding, which is a considerable amount of money for the Rec and Tourism Department. And we will also be fairly soon putting out expression of interest for community tourism infrastructure support via ITI, as well as support for community tourism coordinator program, which the town has received funding already on two, received funding for the past 4 years, and we're in communication with them to see if that can be renewed again. And I'll update council further once we do submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Director of Recreation. Question, Councillor Willows.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just saw some reference in the paper on the NWT Tourism Board. I'm just wondering, one, do we have members on the tourism board? Is there a set number that our community is allowed to have on that board? And if we do have members, who they are? Thank you.
Director.
I think, given that I've just taken on the tourism supervision of the tourism coordinator and his duties, I think the SAO might be in a better position to answer that question.
SAO Smith.
Thank you, Worship. I don't believe we have anyone active. There has been other community operators that have in the past, but I probably should circle back on response to that one. I don't think our tourism and development coordinator was added at the last election either. So I'll circle back and let you know.
Fair enough. Yeah, I know we did have representation on the previous one, but I'm not sure on the new one. I hadn't heard the outcome of that either. So we will get back to council with an answer. Deputy Mayor Bouchard, go ahead.
And I know it's in his report too, but so it talks about winterizing the VIC building. Are we closing down that building, or is that just for the RV stuff?
Director?
Yeah, the building will remain open throughout the winter, and it's just normal winterizing to make sure that the RV station is winterized, and also to make sure the building itself is ready for winter.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? None being noted. Back to SAO Smith.
Thank you, Worship. The Director of Public Works and Services.
Thank you, Your Worship. First up, just an answer to a question that came up last week. There was a question on the bleeders. We didn't end up turning them off in the spring this year, just due to the COVID situation at the time. So Public Works staff did not turn the bleeders off. So we haven't gone around this fall turning them back on since they hadn't been turned off. We will be getting some messaging out this week, just informing residents that if they had turned them off themselves, that they should be turning them back on. And if there is any issues or questions, to feel free to contact our staff. This week, our priority on Public Works is snow clearing. So we got the downtown core pretty much done today. We'll be working out from there, doing the residential areas the rest of this week, getting the snow cleared from there. Along with that, I'm also working on updating the snow clearing policy, just so that it's more in line with kind of the actual activities that take place. Just noting some of the differences in resources required to clear some of the areas of town versus other areas. Just make sure the policy is reflective of that. Working on a couple of planning and zoning items, just moving those forward, getting some rezoning work through the necessary processes so that can come forward. I've been working on some funding applications and capital projects planning for next year and subsequent years. Working on a few applications for the next round of ICIP funding that is currently out. So those applications will be going in early December. And other than that, I have a call with our consultant on our water license renewal process tomorrow. We will be submitting our responses to comments that have been made on the draft license, as well as our kind of closing final arguments on it. And that's really the last step before it goes to the board and out to the minister. We are still on schedule, on the latest schedule for that. So expecting the new water license sometime early in 2021. That's my updates for this week.
Thank you, Director. Any questions from council? Go ahead, Councillor Willis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A number of weeks ago, we got a rather fulsome and lengthy discussion about the landfill and the tires and various options that were open to us. And then if I look at the paper tonight, at least I would assume it means that we've chosen an option, but it doesn't tell us what it is. I'm just wondering if we have any more information about exactly what the decision was.
SAO Smith.
We've been exploring some of our options. Sorry, thank you, Worship. But I'll probably just pass that on to the Director of Public Works to give you a better idea to that question.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, we're still kind of working through the options. We've been there's been waiting on some information from the GNWT. I know at a territorial level, they've been trying to work with recycling organizations in Alberta and the Alberta government to try and come to a solution that works for us, so that, you know, we're hopeful that we can shred the tires and ship them out that way, as opposed to having to ship full tires out, or that we can shred them locally and do something with the product locally. But we are waiting on kind of some more information from the territorial government before we do have a final decision on that.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Just question about that Coutre Street, and obviously it's always when we start getting snow in there and they clean off the sidewalk and it gets piled up on the edge of the road and people are having to drive through that or have to jump over with their vehicles. Is it still remaining that Coutre Street, they are one of our highest priorities to get to right after a snowfall?
Director.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, Coutre Street is definitely very top priorities. We look to get it cleared as one of the first places to get cleared when we do the clearing.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just wondering if there's any possibility that we could look into getting LED lights put on the Mackenzie Highway road. There are patches where it's quite dark, where there's no lighting, and that's as you're coming into town. And then there's a little bit of lighting as people can turn left to go into the hospital. But really, I mean, it's not a well lit road, considering it's our main thoroughfare. So I'm just wondering if there's any possibility that we could look into LED lights that might brighten up that road somewhat, and for safety too as well. Thank you.
I will look into it. Anything further from council? Nothing noted. Back to SAO Smith.
Thank you, Worship. Maybe just a quick follow-up on the highway lights. I know this has been brought up before, and while it's not our jurisdiction, and there's probably standards that are adhered to. I know we did inquire previously with the Department of Infrastructure, but we can, as the mayor suggested, we can check into where those conversations went and pass on concerns. A few things from my side, like a lot of our staff are on this call, administration's focusing on capital budgeting and our ISIP applications for funding. So significant opportunity through that process, with our call being completed for the second and final round for projects to be funded for completion by 2027. So we have met with the Finance Committee on that to give them an update last week, and we'll have some more information coming out of that to Council this month. Also, myself and the Director of Protective Services did meet with MACA and Health and Social Services to discuss community COVID surge planning. For the most part, is Health and Social Services has done a really good job with preparing for needs around community planning. So we thank them for that, but we are working together to update a few points there with MACA. We've also been making some progress on our omnibus rates bylaw. So we should be bringing that as planned to council before end of this year with suggestions on usage rate changes and putting those all into one bylaw. And as well as we've made some progress on our management bylaw, and again, as scheduled, should have a draft completed by this end of November and into council's hands in December. Just a few announcements that I've been trying to share. I'm not sure if I've got all to you or if you've seen in the media, but a few announcements related to community government funding coming out of the legislature and MACA. But it was announced that 4.8 million was coming to community governments through the COVID Safe Restart program that would support O&M, and we are expecting in the neighborhood of $300,000 for that. As well as the announcements made around capital funding gap and MACA's increased contribution of 2.6 million. Again, we're expecting around $300,000, nothing official yet that we've had to sign off on, but that is being worked into our budgeting process. And also we did receive, and it was in the news this week, or last week on from a territorial government perspective, the announcement from Sport Canada for COVID emergency support. So we were able to secure $25,000 that would help support our costs and revenue losses associated with COVID for recreation. And that's all I have for you right now. If there's any questions.
Any questions for SAO? Councillor Willows, go ahead.
My apologies. I'm full of questions tonight, and I probably should have asked this question to the director or to the mayor about the municipal enforcement, and I forgot. But I noticed in the bylaw paper that we had 13 taxi complaints in the last month. And I know that administration was working with the local cab companies to try to sort out some of the obstacles around taxis, especially with winter coming on. So I was just curious if we have any update as how those conversations or discussions are going with the two cab companies. Thank you.
SAO Smith.
Thank you, Worship. So yes, we have reached out to both licensed companies in town. We've had a meeting with one. The other one we have not had success with in meeting. However, we have given some deadlines in November towards working together on a plan that would help improve those services. I'd say the first meeting that we held was positive, but we have set some expectations on improvements and adherence to the current bylaws. So we should have more of an update by the end of November.
Thank you. Any other questions for our SAO? Deputy Mayor Bouchard, go ahead.
Thank you, Richard. I've heard a few concerns and read some in social media, and then we had a meeting at Town Hall today and the hours that the Town Hall is currently open is like 11 to 3, I think. And when we were at a meeting at Town Hall this afternoon after 3, it was seen probably 4, maybe 5 people kind of turn away at the door because it's locked. Do we have any plans to extend the hours of Town Hall opening? What are the what are the limiting factors to us opening longer?
SAO Smith.
Thank you, Worship. So yeah, our customer service hours were reduced to the hours mentioned by Deputy Mayor Bouchard following our return to work during the first COVID announcements there. So the COVID was the primary driving reason there, and also our staffing. So when we did return to the office, we had some vacancies there. So I guess those are the driving reasons, or have been the driving reasons. As of this week, I think we will have our full complement of staff in the town hall. I guess it can be argued whether we're in a more a safer or unsafer world right now with COVID risks increasing in the south. But I think between the change in staffing and our adjustment through the last several months, it's probably now is a good time that we can commit to looking at those hours and what we can offer. Say our productivity has been high for the customer service positions that focus on other activities. But the demand does seem low, but we do see people that have been turned around. We do advertise and encourage, I guess, the public until any adjustments might be made, that they can contact us to schedule appointments. So we will look at getting back to you on any adjustments that we might be able to put in place.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? Nothing noted. We're going to move on to item number 8, new business. 8A, you have before you a copy of the Tourism and Economic Development Report for October 2020. Need a motion. Councillor Dufert, seconded by Councillor Willows. Any questions? None being noted. Agreed to take forward. Perfect, thank you. 8B, Emergency Services Monthly Report for October 2020, looking for a motion. Deputy Mayor Bouchard, seconded by Councillor Chambers. Any questions to the motion? None being noted. Agreed to take forward. Okay, thank you. Item number 8C, municipal. You have before you a copy of the Municipal Enforcement Monthly Report for October 2020. Looking for a motion. Councillor Willows, seconded by Councillor Dufert. Any questions to the motion? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, not too many questions, as I do like the report. It looks good, and I have heard concerns about the volume of motor vehicles, but I do see the majority of them have been warnings. So I do think there is a need for that, and I do like to see that most of it's educational and warnings right now, and the only tickets they're being handing out are for serious infractions such as no license and no registration type stuff. So good report.
For stop sign. We are a rolling stop kind of group, apparently. I am very conscious even now when I was reading about that. So agreed to take forward, guys? Perfect, thank you. 8D, public. You have before you a copy of the Public Works Monthly Report for October 2020. Looking for a motion. Councillor Willow, seconded by Councillor Chambers. Any questions to the motion? Agreed to take forward? Thank you. 8D, you have before you a copy of the Public Works Monthly Report for October 2020. Looking for a motion. Councillor Dufert, seconded by Councillor Dowie. Any questions to the motion? None being noted. Agreed to take forward. Thank you. Item 8E, Recreation Monthly Report for October 2020. Looking for a motion. Councillor Dowie, seconded by Councillor Chambers. Any questions to the motion? None being noted. Agreed to take forward. Thank you. 8F, Development Permit Application D20-065. Looking for a motion. Councillor or Deputy Mayor Bouchard and Councillor Willows, any questions? None noted, agreed to take forward. Thank you. And 8G, which I believe we are passing over to our Director of Finance. I'll give it to SAO Smith first. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. We will pass it over to the Director of Public Works to present the 2021 draft capital budget. I just wanted to provide a bit of an introduction there. So administration has drafted the capital budget that is presented. It considers key town area planning documents such as our 2019-23 strategic plan that we just updated as a group, our capital plan and several operational plans. The budget itself heavily supports the necessary replacement of our core municipal infrastructure and associated assets, and also leverages a lot of the favorable contribution funding that we have had in front of us recently and are continuing to see. But it does speak towards some new identified growth that council has had an interest in, specifically around housing development. So the timing of the draft 2021 capital budget, it's intended today to allow you to review and get input from council, and then going to the public this week ahead of the approval of the final capital plan in December. So that's scheduled for mid-December. And as was mentioned earlier, although I think I incorrectly verified the location of the public consultation meeting, again, it's this Thursday at 6:30 p.m., but it's at the Doug Wiederman Hall, which is in the community center. So the public and council are certainly invited to attend, and administration will be there to present. I will also invite the public to submit comments to administration, and as they always have the option to the council. So I'll pass it over to our Director of Finance now to run through it, and I believe he'll take questions at the end of the presentation.
I'm just going to interrupt there for one moment. I'm going to look for a motion before we start discussion. So Councillor Willows. Motion seconded by Deputy Mayor Bouchard. So we will have the discussion now, and we'll pass it over to our Director of Finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, SAO Smith, for that introduction, and good evening again, everyone. Tonight, I'll be presenting the draft 2021 capital budget. The purpose of bringing this before you now is to facilitate discussion and allow for additional time for public input. We also wanted to get this information before council to better illustrate how our O&M budget will feed into our capital reserve requirements. I'll ask that any questions that arise from this be held until the end of my presentation, at which point I or one of the other directors will answer any questions raised. So on this slide, this is just a high-level summary of capital budget by department. So we're showing our 2021 draft budget and our 2020 budget from previous year. So administration, we're at 2021, 740,000. Protective services, 120,000. Recreation, it's just a hair over $1 million. Tourism and economic development is 39.5. And transportation public works is 16.2 million. So a grand total of $18.1 million is what we're budgeting for 2021. 2021, I'll note that includes a $7.4 million carry forward from the previous year. So that was $7.4 million was included in that 2020 budget. And for a variety of reasons, the work was not completed. So a large portion of that, roughly $5.5 million of that, was related to the lift station. We also weren't able to complete, or we will not be able to complete, about $500,000 for the tire recycling program. We weren't able to complete the town hall demolition, and a variety of other smaller projects. Next slide, please, Stacy. So this slide is just a visual summary of what I just discussed. So as you can see, the lion's share of the capital spend, 90% of it falls under public works. For a municipality, that is fairly standard, and that's comparable with previous years. Next slide, please. So this slide shows a breakdown between new assets and replacement. Approximately $2.5 million of our 2021 budget is new assets. Around $15.4 million is for replacement of existing assets. Of the new assets, the bulk of that, sorry, I said $2.7 million of new assets. The bulk of that relates to the development of Fraser Place, which will assist in facilitating growth of the tax base. Next slide, please, Stace. So on the next 3 slides, we've got a breakdown by department. This is a list, just in alphabetical order, of the different projects that we've got in our draft budget. Starting with transportation and public works, I'm just going to speak to the most significant items on the list. I put a star next to projects for which the bulk of the spending and work will be in future years beyond 2021. So this includes the new town hall, the Sundog, subdivision development, the water treatment plant, and the Capitol Drive roadwork. So in 2021, these projects are just in their preliminary and design stages. The major capital projects being undertaken include completion of the roadwork at Caribou Crescent and commencement on Riverview and Beaver. We're also going to be finishing the work on the new lift station, which we'd started this year. As I mentioned, we're also budgeting to complete the bulk of the development work in Fraser Place in 2021, with that work concluding in 2022. Next slide, please. Recreation, many of these projects are single year and funded fully through third-party funding. Several of the items on this list were carried forward items from 2020. As due to COVID, we were unable to either procure the funding or complete the preliminary work on these jobs. We also included in this year's budget several items for the golf course. The town is assisting in procuring third-party funding for capital replacement of those facilities, but won't be utilizing its reserves to fund those assets. So really, the town is just providing support in going after funding opportunities to help replace those assets. Next slide, please. So this slide just covers administration, protective services, and tourism and economic development. For administration, we're continuing to replace our computer equipment and paying down our long-term debt on the recreation center. Protective services, the bulk of their dollars are budgeted for communication tower replacement, as the current communication tower failed in October. And for tourism, we have a couple of new items for 2021, which we anticipate will be funded through CanNorth. Next slide, please. So this slide just shows a breakdown between the 2021 and 2020 budgets, whether it's funded externally or internally. So we have the bulk of our internal funding comes from reserves. So of the $2.5 million that we're budgeting to spend from internal sources, about $1.5 million of that is coming from our reserves. We're also going to be funding it in part through dedicated property taxes. and through the sale of lots in Fraser Place. We're going to be pre-selling those lots. Of the external funding, the bulk of that is coming through the Investment in Canada Infrastructure Program. 2019, we had successfully applied for funding through that program. So that is just a hair under $7 million. We're also utilizing about $5.5 million of gas tax and CPI fund, which are federal and territorial capital funding programs. Fraser Place, the Fraser Place pre-sales as well are here for another $1.3 million, and other funding sources. So these are the I guess smaller programs, Canor, et cetera, is 1.8 million. Next slide, please. So this slide just shows us a breakdown of our current closing. So it's a projected 2020 closing balance of the town's various reserve accounts. Again, it's going to be subject to our financial performance over the next couple of months, but we're anticipating that we're going to have around $3.1 million in reserves. Now, of those reserves, I'll stress that the landfill reserve on there, we anticipate 860,000. That's already dedicated. That is funding that will be used for the ultimate remediation of the landfill. So we're projecting being able to add to our reserves from 2020 about $1 million. And the breakdown again is all based on estimates at this point in time. But that was what we had budgeted at the beginning of the year as a transfer. And we feel at this point like we're still on track to be able to achieve that. However, we're anticipating that we're going to be drawing down on our reserves by $1,561,000. So I guess at a high level, we're taking more out of our reserves next year than we anticipate that we'll be putting in the current year. So in the long term, that's not sustainable. It's being done at this point because we were able to, through ICIP, get 75 cents on the dollar for capital replacement. And when those funding opportunities come along, it's important to strike when the iron's hot. So I think that's where I'll leave it and open it up to if there's any questions. Thank you.
You're on mute, Candice.
Deputy Mayor, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, my first question is along those lines of that, reserves. So we are falling behind in our reserves if we do all this expenditure. And I know we're spending money more than we normally would because of that infrastructure of $75. But knowing that we have some major expenditures, let's say a water treatment plant and stuff like that, I know the capital fund ties to the O&M fund. So right now we're projecting $1 million for the O&M fund for this fiscal year. I know we're not discussing that, but that's the plan, is to continue the $1 million contribution to the reserves.
Yes, that's what was in the budget. That was in the 2020 budget last year.
And we're doing the same at 2021?
No, we're taking it out. This is 2020 year end. We're projecting that we should be able to put $1 million into reserves. In 2021, we're planning on, or if we approve this budget, we would be taking 5. So that was what our director was speaking to, that's not sustainable in the long run. But while there is funding available with the 75-25, it's a smart move to do some of these bigger projects. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, and my concern is that we have bigger projects coming up on the line. So I'm not sure. My concern is that are we at the right levels for those reserves? I know it ties to the O&M and how much we have to put into them, but it is a concern if we're falling behind in our infrastructure going forward.
Comment or question in there? Sorry, Deputy Mayor.
Well, my question was, so we are committing $1 million to go into reserves this year, right?
Correct.
So we're spending 1.5.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. SAO Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Maybe I'll just add a little bit to that. I think you've answered it well there, but there is still, as we advance through the O&M budgeting process, this is part of the reason of trying to get the capital in front is that we can kind of understand a bit on what our demands are looking for, so you can have a full discussion as we move towards the final budget, but a review of our O&M budget as well, which is where we've been setting our contributions to reserves. We do have a lot of capital in front of us right now, and we are, yes, leveraging what we have in the contribution funding to complete those. We are putting in there has been some, including the announcements that I mentioned, or indication that we will be getting some additional support through MACA addressing the contribution shortfalls. But as it stands right now, I think, where it's equating to about $4 or $5 million per year with what we've been doing for $1 million contribution or $1 million surplus allocation into reserves. So there's questions on some big projects, including the water treatment plant, that we want to look at further through actually work in 2021 that's budgeted and on this plan. But we are pretty comfortable with where we are sitting as we head into looking into the future. Big question will be the water treatment plant, but yeah, the town has done a good job. I mean, in recent years here with the rec center and some of the other facilities, of course, a lot of questions as well on land development. But for most of those, we'll be needing to continue to chase the money and access major infrastructure funding.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? Go ahead, Councillor Willis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's more of a comment than a question, and recognition where recognition is due. I mean, we've come a long ways with regard to our budgeting and our presentations, and this is a really good it's concise, it's informative, it shows, it'll show the public how we got there and where the money's going, where we're getting funding from outside and where we're funding from the inside. So it's just a huge improvement from where we were a number of years ago. And so my hat's off to administration for this document. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have one. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
Okay, thank you, Worship. Just, again, I'm very pleased with the presentation, and it's well done. So thank you very much for putting the work into it. I'm concerned about the water treatment plant like everybody else is, I'm sure. The replacement, obviously, and what that is going to cost and where we're going to get funding from. So that's something that's definitely, I think is a priority for us. But anyway, I think it's a good presentation. I'm actually very comfortable with it, and thank you very much for putting the work into it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dowie, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. My only question I have for this evening on this, maybe a little trivial compared to some of these bigger ticket items, but it was just something I was kind of surprised. The communications tower on the fire hall, is that something that that we were hoping to get insurance money out of? And is that something that we've investigated and been turned down for, or what's the update on that, Your Worship?
Thank you. I'll pass that one over to SAO Smith.
Thank you, Worship. No, so we do anticipate and then have budgeted, including this budget, dollars that will be used to support the replacement through insurance. So still working through the process, but that's the plan at this point.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I like like Councillor Willow said, I like the numbers. I think they're very concise. The only area of concern that I would have is just, and I think the director alluded to it, was just marking some of the items that are, I think, farther down the line. I want to see the new town hall, Sundog subdivision, water treatment. If we're listing all that stuff, maybe just a miscommunication to the public that there should be an asterisk there that we're looking at that in the future years. I know some of these are projects we're taking. Most of these are projects we're taking on, but I know a couple of those are probably a year or two down the road, I'm assuming.
That's correct. They're on this, they're listed here because there is work being done to move those projects forward, not necessarily in 2021. So our director did specifically, they aren't marked on there, but he did say Capitol Drive was one of them. The town hall is another one. There's some disaster mitigation, environmental remediation that needs to be done, and the demolition work needs to be done on it. So that money's earmarked. Subdivision Sundog, there'll be some work on that as well. And the water treatment plant, there's money in there to do to get us some information we need to make decisions moving forward. But yeah, the actual dollars to build a new water treatment plant are not in this. However, there is funds being built or being spent as we move forward. And I will just run that one by SAO Smith, make sure I didn't misinform you, but.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I'm not sure if we missed one there either, but we've actually updated the presentation, didn't make it into the package, but we will provide some notes so that it's more clearly indicated in the public, and so that there's no misleading there.
Thank you. And we will be sure to have that updated for our meeting with the public on Thursday night. I did have a question for, I guess it's for our SAO about capacity. Like I noticed that last year we budgeted 13. We didn't spend 7 million of that. We're adding that on to this year's. So, you know, we did a 6 million, we spent approximately $6 million last year on capital, but do we have the capacity to get this done this year, I guess is my question.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And I think that is a very relevant question. It's been something that we've been taking a close look at, and we've committed in our strategic plan to completing a human resource plan as well to help ensure and mitigate some of the risks there. But yeah, there's a lot on the plate, and a lot of it is tied towards securing contribution funding, and that then can tend to carry over. COVID this year certainly had an impact on delays. We had to work through some of our land management issues as well, our land acquisition issue with our one major project. But I think key to that is really getting our resources in place. We're close in our recruitment to hiring for our civil infrastructure manager, and that is probably the most key position towards ensuring we have more resources going into next year in a larger capital plan. But we will be taking a close look to see where there's opportunities to support through capital the additional human resources needed.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? Well, look at you guys. I will thank our Director of Finance for all his hard work, all our directors, because I know that a lot goes into this one especially. So thank you for all your hard work. And it is very, very good to see the presentation like it is. It is clear and concise. So with that.
Your Worship,
sorry, Deputy Mayor.
Just a question on that meeting on Thursday. Is that for capital only, or is that capital and O&M?
Capital only. We haven't seen the O&M yet.
Yeah.
So no, capital only, and we'll go back again probably in December with O&M is where we're at on that. Okay, so with that, I'm going to ask you all, we're about to move in camera, but I need a motion to go in camera first off. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Dufert. And so I will ask you all, do you solemnly swear and sincerely affirm that you are alone and cannot be overheard while in camera? Starting with Councillor Dowie.
Thank you, Your Worship. I swear.
Councillor Dufert.
Thank you, Your Worship, I swear.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Your Worship, I swear.
Councillor Willows.
I swear.
Councillor Bouchard.
I swear.
Councillor Grunewagen.
I swear.
And Councillor Chambers.
I swear.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, we will take a, how about we're back here at, is 3 minutes good enough? 7:55, guys. Quick break.